specifications for just under $200. It definitely looks good on paper, but how does the S3 fare in normal day-to-day use? This is my full review of the JIAYU S3. The JIAYU S3 is available in two different variants, one with 2GB of RAM and another with 3GB of RAM. Both of these variants are only sold in black, although a silicone case is included in the box. There's really not a whole lot to say about the design. The rear cover is made completely of matte plastic, which does a nice job at resisting both fingerprints and scratches. You can remove the cover fairly easily to access the battery, dual SIM card slots, and a microSD card slot. The phone does have a subtle curve, but still retains the side edges that make the device easier to grip. It reminds me a lot of the Asus Zenfone 5, although the plastic doesn't feel as nice in the hand. It does weigh in at 160 grams, and it is 8.9 millimeters thick. I would say that the S3 feels solid in the hand. It's not uncomfortable, but you definitely won't forget whether or not it's in your pocket. Taking a closer look at the phone, you'll see a 13 megapixel Sony camera with dual flash at the top and the JIAYU logo near the bottom. Below the JIAYU logo lies a speaker grill for the device's stereo speakers. The micro USB port is on the bottom left, next to the primary microphone. The secondary noise-canceling microphone is on the top right, next to the headphone jack. The power and volume buttons are on the right side of the phone, both of which are positioned well for one-handed use. However, these buttons lack responsiveness and feel unsatisfying. You really have to push the buttons to get a response from the phone, which can be annoying, especially when you're trying to adjust the volume or quickly lock the phone. Fortunately, it does support double tap to wake in addition to a few other gestures which launch specific apps. Taking a look at the front of the S3, you'll find a 5 megapixel Samsung front-facing camera on the top and 3 capacitive keys on the bottom. These 3 buttons are illuminated, but it's so subtle that you probably won't notice the illumination unless you're in a dark environment. That's actually okay though, since the outlines of each button are present without illumination. There's also a notification LED at the top left of the device, which flashes a very bright green for missed calls and notifications. Overall, the design is admittedly pretty basic. There really isn't anything unique about it. It's made completely of plastic, it's only available in black, and just kind of looks plain out boring. I do have to give JIAYU some credit for not copying Apple here, but there's really nothing unique in terms of design. However, if you do happen to like simple and understated, then you'll likely find yourself favoring the design. The 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display looks pretty good both indoors and outdoors. The display is incredibly sharp, but the contrast ratio is slightly less than recent phones that I've tested. The viewing angles are very good, but the brightness range could have been better. The highest brightness setting is great, but the lowest setting is still fairly bright. It's still a great display, and you'll likely only notice its low contrast ratio when comparing it to other smartphone displays. JIAYU does claim that the S3 is coated in Corning Gorilla Glass 3, but I found that the display did scratch pretty easily. I noticed several scratches just after putting the phone in my pocket for an hour without any other objects. I'm not sure why it scratches so easily, but you're definitely going to want to use a screen protector. Fortunately, there's one included in the box. I was able to test the JIAYU S3 on AT&T's United States network, but I was limited to 2G edge speeds. The frequencies for this phone are GSM 850, 900, 1800, 1900 for 2G speeds, WCDMA 900, 1900, 2100 for 3G speeds, TD-SCDMA 1900, 2100 for 3G in China only, FDD LTE bands 3, 7, and 20 for 4G LTE, and finally TDD LTE bands 39, 40, and 41 for 4G LTE. If you have AT&T, you will always receive up to 2G speeds on the 850 and 1900 bands. You'll also occasionally receive HSPA Plus speeds on the 1900 band in densely populated areas where AT&T has additional network spectrum. Be aware that since the 850 band is the primary frequency on AT&T's network and is not supported on the S3, you may experience reduced data coverage or reduced data speeds by using the 1900 band exclusively. If you have T-Mobile, you will always receive up to 2G speeds on the 1900 band. You'll also be able to access HSPA Plus in areas where T-Mobile has refarmed their network with 1900 support, typically where LTE is available. Do keep in mind that you can't actually receive LTE in these areas, and that you can't use just the 2100 band to access HSPA+. You need both the 1700 and 2100 bands for that, so the 2100 band here is pretty much useless for T-Mobile users. There is, unfortunately, no 4G LTE support in the United States either. If you're living outside of the United States, you can check what frequency bands your carrier uses by using the links to both 3G and 4G LTE networks below. Call quality on the JIAYU S3 was a bit better than average. The earpiece is loud and clear, callers had no complaints, and I did not have any dropped calls.
Money to your account or change your rate plan. Please press 2. If you would like to hear instructions about how to configure your iPhone, Android, or other handset,
I was expecting the stereo speakers to sound excellent, but they seem to be heavily distorted. The speakers don't sound any better than average, and they can arguably sound worse at full volume. Full volume is fairly loud, but the speaker is also easily blocked on flat surfaces. The audio is just okay for the phone's price, so it's not worth getting excited over the stereo speakers. The 13-megapixel Sony IMX214 rear camera with an f2.0 aperture was pretty hit or miss. Some of the images it took were blurry and out of focus, but others were fairly good. Low-light shots did lack sharpness, which is kind of to be expected. Video recording is definitely its weak point. Here's a 1080p sample clip. The JIAYU S3 ships with a skinned version of Android 4.4.4 KitKat. Upon boot, you'll find completely different icons, JIAYU's own customized launcher, and just some general UI changes. The good news here is that JIAYU did include a Themes app with a system option, which changes the icons back to the defaults and also tidies up other areas of the interface, including the notification shade and dialer app. I have replaced the Android open source project keyboard with the Google keyboard from the Play Store, installed the Google Now launcher, and also refused to use anything but the system theme. My experience has been pretty good with the software, however, there are a few things that I wanted to note. First of all, JIAYU replaced the unlock logo on the lock screen with their own logo, which just seems to be very poor branding. Secondly, the notification shade doesn't allow me to swipe right to dismiss notifications. You have to swipe left. Swiping right literally does nothing for dismissal. Finally, the toggles on the notification shade use the ugly hollow blue, which should have been replaced with white as of Android 4.4. Aside from those few complaints, the software is actually pretty good. I was especially thankful that JIAYU included a super user root toggle in the security settings, which allows users to root the device without the trouble of doing it manually. Just to be clear, this is disabled by default for obvious security reasons, but it can be easily enabled. There are not any root methods for the MT6752 out at the moment either, so it's good that JIAYU offers the option. Although there hasn't been any official news regarding an Android 5.0 Lollipop update, I do have faith that JIAYU will release an update within the next few months. JIAYU has been pretty good at keeping their devices up to date with the latest software and bug fixes in the past, so I have about 80% confidence that the device will get a Lollipop update. After all, the JIAYU G4S that I reviewed last summer was one of the few MT6592 phones to receive the KitKat update. JIAYU is a very respectable brand and has actually released an over-the-air update to fix some initial bugs. Powered by the MediaTek MT6752 octa-core Cortex-A53 64-bit processor clocked at 1.7 GHz, the S3 is a very powerful phone. The benchmark scores are also pretty good, scoring at 39,890 in Antutu and 805 single-core, 3,888 multi-core in Geekbench. As I stated earlier, there are two variants, one with 2 GB of RAM and another with 3 GB of RAM. I have the 2GB model, which was enough during my testing, but you may want to consider getting the 3GB model if you do plan on owning the device for more than a year or so, since applications are becoming more resource intensive by the day. It does include the Mali T760 MP2 GPU, which provides excellent gaming performance. Games like Asphalt 8 played well even on high settings, and all games loaded pretty quickly. The S3 does have 16 gigabytes of onboard storage, with an option to expand up to 64 gigabytes via the microSD card slot. GPS on the JIAYU S3 was actually quite impressive. The lock time is within about 5 seconds, and the accuracy is some of the best I've seen. I did test GPS navigation with Here Maps, and it worked just as expected. The S3 does have a 3000 mAh removable battery, which should last through a full day of average use. JIAYU is being super honest about the battery capacity and actually labeled the battery as 3000 mAh to 3100 mAh, since an exact capacity is difficult to achieve. I was able to use the device from about 7 a.m. until about 6:30 p.m. with 3 hours of screen on time before the battery died. That was with the brightness set to about 75% and standby power saving mode being activated. I did test it over Edge, so if you're getting 3G or LTE, you likely won't reach these estimates. It should last for more than 12 hours with average use though, and you should get close to that with heavy use if you dial down the brightness. If you purchase the JIAYU S3 from Panduil, you'll receive JIAYU documentation, a Panduil Quick Start Guide, a silicone case, a screen protector, a micro USB cable, and a US AC adapter. The JIAYU S3 is a great choice for some users, but I honestly wouldn't use it as a daily driver. On the upside, the phone is incredibly powerful, has a mostly stock software experience, and offers expandable storage. However, the design is very plain, the camera can be hit or miss, and the audio output quality is just disappointing. If you can't adjust to the changes made in Flyme on the M1 Note, then this is the phone to buy for under $200. Otherwise, the Meizu M1 Note is just the better option. That may change in the future if JIAYU releases an Android 5.0 Lollipop update before Meizu, but for now, the S3 is just an alternative option. If you do want to check it out, there will be links in the description to view both models on Panduil's website. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and also leave me a comment below letting me know your thoughts on the JIAYU S3. That is going to be all for this video. Thank you for watching, and please be sure to subscribe.